Okay. So I think we're actually going to get started. So if you're filing in, kind of come in closer, sit down. There are plenty of seats. But we want to start to get this going. So today we're going to be talking about the 3 steps to developing a content strategy. My name's Jory, and I'm the conversion rate optimization and analytics professor for Hubspot Academy. What does that mean? Essentially, it means that I'm tasked with keeping a pulse on what's happening in the marketing, services, and sales industries so that I can kind of keep you guys informed into the best practices for lead generation efforts. I'm also tasked with making sure that people have the education they need to take their data and turn it into a usable story. So I guess you could say that I'm the data nerd at HubSpot Academy. For those of you that don't know, HubSpot Academy is HubSpot's official learning resource, and it's the worldwide leader in inbound marketing and sales education, completely free to use. So we only have a short time together, and if I mention any tactics or strategies that really pique your interest today, feel free to head over to academy.hubspot.com, where you can sign up for a free portal and kind of access our full certifications and our more bite-sized lessons if you have more of a time crunch. And it will go into all of the steps that I mentioned here today. So our agenda, again, it's pretty packed, but that's okay. So I've just gone through the introduction of who I am, but then I'm going to go into a bit of the state of marketing, sales, and services, as well as the 3 steps to developing a content strategy. And then I also want to leave you guys with some next steps. So sometimes it can feel like these presentations are really abstract, and I don't necessarily want you guys thinking, okay, like that's a great idea, what next? So I want to give you guys some next steps that you can do today to really get started with these techniques. So before we dig into the weeds too much with strategy, I'm actually going to start with a story. So without further ado, I have a kind of dramatic people have changed. At the dawn of the internet, when the internet first kind of arrived, it ushered in an era of unprecedented information exchange. Suddenly, anyone with an idea could get attention for free. Now, this meant that companies, products, and media platforms all multiplied. Information was everywhere, so choices, they felt pretty limitless. But then something interesting happened. People suddenly had access to infinite content. But over time, that actually became a bit of a hassle, a lot to sift through. And so technology helped streamline that content. People suddenly had access to endless options. Predictably, that over time also became a hassle. And so technology helped refine those options. Alexa, Siri. And people kept having to enter in their information. Everyone these days seems to have their own opinions about forms. And you can imagine, over time, that became a hassle. And so technology, it took care of that too. So these might seem like a couple of B2C disparate examples, but the message becomes clear, right? Little or small, or little or big, B2C or B2B, if you're creating hassle today, you're going to be gone tomorrow. So back at the beginning of the internet, in the past, we had endless publishers, created endless options. This led to a relatively homogeneous website experience. Now, we've evolved a bit. We're using a few aggregators, like Google, but also like Facebook and Amazon, to really get the information and the data we need. These services are leading to highly curated options and are producing a highly personalized experience. So business today, in some ways, you could say, it's not just about what you're selling anymore. It's about how you're selling it. And this should make sense, right? Like the march of progress has always favored simplicity. When humans started navigating the world, we started by using the stars. And that was really difficult, right? They always seemed to move. You never could really figure out where you left Orion's belt. You had to squint. It was a total pain. And this led to the development of maps. But we're now in the 21st century. So this maps, again, got simplified into GPS. And today, we're sort of in the time of self-driving cars. And you have to imagine that teleportation is on its way, right? Maybe not? Okay. So let's take a look at more specific examples. So the companies that are really winning today, they're, again, favoring simplicity. But you'll notice a couple trends. So in the past, if you wanted to get music, for example, you'd head to your local record store, maybe buy a record, but that became a CD as technology advanced. And then we turned to iTunes. You know, if you wanted to make that epic breakup playlist, it was a hassle to download those 15 albums to get just what you needed. And now, recently, people are turning to streaming services like Spotify because they don't want to even make the playlist anymore. They want it there, perfect, and ready for their bleeding heart. But this can be translated into the B2B realm, right? So in the past, if you had a specific strategic challenge that your business was facing, you would go on a headhunt for that MBA or that strategist that could help solve that unique challenge. And technology helps streamline that process. Businesses like McKinsey rose out of this need, and suddenly it was more of an on-demand consulting firm. But at the same time, now businesses are turning to companies like Catalent, which are much more on-demand because dealing with McKinsey's contracts, their terms of service, it can feel like it's weighing you down. It takes effort. The march of progress is going and favoring simplicity. So the companies that are winning today, they share a few key traits. In the past, it was okay to be available 9 to 5, right? Your workforce, it has to go home. Now the companies that win are available 24/7. In the past, it was okay to have a relatively high upfront investment that would pay off over time. Now, the companies that are winning are free and quick to start. In the past, it was okay to have your website experience offer a relatively generic, not very focused experience for every customer. Now, businesses that win are offering a very highly personalized experience. People don't want to feel like they're just a number to your company anymore. They want to feel like they have a very one-to-one relationship with you. And in the past, it was okay to have your customers really tell you what they needed and to respond with, what can I help you with? Today, the companies that win are highly predictive. They know what you need. They're so in tune with what you could want that they already know before you even ask. So as this trend is kind of moving towards simplicity, as we're seeing high refinement in the space of the internet, this has changed marketing. Information is going from sought to surfaced. So while it's really good to be findable, I bet you guys have learned a lot about that today, where you need to break into that first page of search results. It's far better to meet your customers where they are and really break into those snippets that you see to rise to the top of the Facebook algorithm. This too has changed the way people experience and expect sales to operate. In sales, what we're seeing is that there is this shift from buyers wanting an unlimited amount of choice to buyers wanting convenience. So where it's good to have a very helpful selling process, it's far better these days to have one that's as easy as humanly possible. This in turn has also affected customer service. In the past, it's been okay to be highly transactional. But now, customers are expecting a highly tailored and, again, personalized experience. So while it's good to be able to ask what you need, it's far better these days to have that answer ready. Here's what you need. So this might make sense, right? This might seem intuitive, and you might be thinking, okay, but why aren't companies doing this more and more? And as it turns out, it's actually not so easy to be easy. So as over time the world favors simplicity, businesses over time, and as you scale, become more complex. So, as we scale, we start to get processes and operations. You start to use different technology, and it can feel like you're juggling a lot. So over time, the choices we make as companies make us more complex. So as a consumer, I know that I get all my information from Google, Facebook, and Amazon. But as a marketer, I realize that I'm struggling to get discovered on any of them. As a consumer, I realize that I buy most from companies that make it easy. But as a sales rep, I create artificial obstacles in the buying process to get that extra bit of information. And as a consumer, I expect a highly personalized experience from everyone, big or small company. But as a customer service rep, I might look at my queue and see a list of problems I need to solve that day, not the people behind them. So this is a new era of business, and customers are really expecting better. So this can seem like a lot, right? You need to be at the top. You need to already be firing on full cylinders, whether it's with your content strategy, your social strategy, your conversational tools, which Kanter will be speaking to a little bit later. So you need to be at the top. But in some ways, as these trends start to move, it can feel like you're starting from the bottom. You have to kind of look up at this summit that seems insurmountable. So where do you start? Well, that's why we're here today. So content marketing, just to review, is the marketing technique of creating and distributing valuable, relevant, and consistent content to a very defined customer base. This brings us to the 3 steps of developing a content strategy. Again, as we're moving towards simplicity and that highly personalized experience, these vectors, content mission statement, understanding your buyer personas, and understanding your buyer's journey will help you get there. So I know it's been a long day, but raise your hand if you've heard of any of these before. Awesome. Raise your hand if you have all of these right now. Nice, nice. Experienced marketer in the room. Awesome. So let's dig into each of these a little bit more in detail. So as Simon Sinek says, Simon Sinek is a marketing consultant, a bit of a prolific writer. People have a lot of opinions about Simon Sinek. But a famous quote of his is that people don't buy what you do. They buy why you do it. And he has a lot more materials that go into this relatively in depth. This is kind of referencing his golden circle. Check it out. Develop your own thoughts. Moving on. Your content mission statement, kind of regardless of how we feel about Simon Sinek, is about helping you understand not only your company's why, not just their product, but your why, but also understanding how you're making a difference in your customers' lives. And this is really going to set the tone for your entire content strategy. So we're going to actually walk hand in hand, to use examples. I always find that examples help, with a business called a.Three. Now, a.Three is a Finnish-based company, and it helps businesses transform unstructured text data into business decision-making information. long purpose, long spiel. But they realized that they were actually not getting the response from their content marketing that they had anticipated. So we're going to walk alongside a.Three because they realized that they needed to make a change in the way they were approaching their content marketing. So first, they started by creating that content mission statement. And again, creating a content mission statement really helps you solidify your company's why. Why are you doing what you're doing? Because if you can't even answer that question, how can you sell it to a customer? How can you sell it to a customer in a highly personalized way? So it helps you start to define your company or business's why. So in a.Three's mission statement, It's a bit long. They started off by saying, we sell an application that transforms unstructured data into business decision-making information. That's what they do. However, when it comes to our content strategy, it's not about marketing our text analysis application. So it's actually not about their product. It's about the idea that everyone should know that there's an automated solution to categorize comments and detect emotions in real time in multiple languages. So rather than focusing on their product, they're trying to solve the unique challenge or goal of their users through education. There's this problem that exists, and there is this solution. So at this point, you might be like, why am I planning content? I'm already trying to juggle so many different strategies, and the idea of planning all of your content out in advance might seem a little insurmountable. There's a couple different reasons you're going to want to plan content. So the first is that it gives your content a roadmap. Ultimately, your content should be focused on clearly demonstrating that why behind your company. The second is that it connects short-term content towards your long-term goals. It makes a difference if that tweet is related to your long-term goal, that blog post, any other types of content. It also helps you identify potential opportunities and uncovers potential roadblocks, right? Because different types of content are going to require different amounts of time, different types of resources. So as you start to plan out content in the long term, you can start to really allocate the time and resources you need to really execute each of these content types well. Again, it ensures that each piece of content has a purpose. You're clearly trying to demonstrate what each of your content is trying to do, which is that why. And it can help you create real business alignment. Not everyone's going to have distinct departments between marketing, sales, and services, but it can really help you start to, with your purpose, talk to other parts of your organization and make sure that you're all going towards the same united front, the same united purpose. So that brings us to the second two parts of creating your content strategy. And that's aligning what you're trying to do, your purpose, with the people you're trying to attract. And the two main vectors that you're going to use to do this are your buyer personas and your buyer's journey. So we're going to start off with buyer personas. So a buyer persona is a semi-fictional representation of your ideal customer using quantitative and qualitative data or analysis. And this is going to include a little bit of different bits of information. So it's going to include of your ideal customer, their background, how they function in the world, potentially any demographics that might set them apart, any identifiers or channels that they're going to be using, goals that they might want to be accomplishing with you and your product, and any challenges that might prevent them from getting there. So we're going to take a look at how a.Three used this to craft their own directed ideal customer. So they identified through the research of their current customer base that usually the buyer that they were working with was a customer experience manager. In this case, they called her Maggie for reference. They identified that she was an insight manager or director, and usually a woman between the ages of 30 to 50, well-educated, lived in an urban area, and had a distinct salary. So this is already a lot of information, right? But they took it that step further because they also realized, and it's a little small, that the person that they were dealing with was usually actually very technically savvy and had their own unique goals and challenges. But what really stood out is that they were dealing with a lot of text data that was unstructured and needed a solution, but was usually also dealing with a boss that didn't quite understand the extent of the problem. So they identified that the typical challenge faced by their ideal customer is, again, they had that text data that was unstructured, and a.Three had the product to solve for that. So they've already aligned that they need to educate users that a solution exists, and they've identified that their ideal customer has that challenge, but might not know that software directly aligns with their needs. So then let's take it to the buyer's journey. So we have, again, our content mission statement that allows us to be direct in the way that we're creating content, the ideal persona or customer that you're going to be dealing with, and then we have this thing called the buyer's journey. And the buyer's journey is the active research process people go through leading them to make a purchase. So these are the steps your customers will take before they ultimately decide to buy from you. And usually, despite the industry or despite the business, this can be broken relatively easily into 3 stages. There's the awareness stage, the consideration stage, and the decision stage. So in the awareness stage, this is when your ideal customer will start to identify that they have a problem. In the consideration stage, this is when your ideal buyer will start to determine that there are different types of solutions. There might be more than one, and it might not be just your product, but there are solutions to their problem. And in the decision stage, that's when they start to narrow down that there is a distinct product or service that can best help them solve their problem. Usually you want, in this stage, for them to be deciding on you. So in a.Twoma's example, Maggie has a lot of unstructured text data and needs to make sense of it. Again, this is something they identified in their research of their current customer base to really help solve and create content that showcases their value to their ideal customer. In the consideration stage, Maggie would usually realize that there's an automated solution to categorize comments and detect emotions in real time in multiple languages. So again, that directly aligns with the service that a.Twooma offers. But in the decision stage, one thing you'll notice, we'll actually go back a couple slides, is that a challenge that Maggie faces is that she often deals with a boss that doesn't understand the extent of her problem. And so what a.Twooma did to align their vectors is in the decision stage, they decided to offer free consultations of their buyer persona's feedback data or data so that they could help showcase to not just Maggie, but the boss that doesn't understand the extent of the issue, that a.Twooma is the correct service for them. So they decided that in the consultation stage, or in the decision stage, that consultations were going to be how they were going to stand apart as a business, stand apart as a product versus their competitors. So again, before creating content, you want to make sure that you understand and make simple the content mission statement of your company. You want to understand who your ideal customer is and what their journey with your company or to your company or product looks like so that you can make sure that everything aligns. You can create content types for the awareness stage, the consideration stage, the decision stage that can help them through that process. And so what did this do for a.Twooma? In the end, what they were able to do is once they aligned their vectors behind a content mission statement, behind their buyer persona, and they understood the full extent of their buyer persona, Maggie's journey, they were able to create a content piece that was receiving 4 times as many leads, if you measure by quality, compared to a piece of content that they had created before they had done this research, before they had aligned these vectors. So it can be very effective, as you can imagine, to align your contents behind these 3 steps and these 3 stages. So I don't want to, again, leave you without things to do. It can seem like a lot. A lot of this is abstract. We have this march towards simplicity. You need to think about ideal customers. And what you can do, because we, again, only have so long together, is if you're interested in following a.Twooma's story a little bit more in depth, to go step by step through the process they did to create this content piece specifically that was able to convert them 4 times as many leads, you can, and I believe this presentation is going to be sent out afterwards, so don't worry about the links. You can head over to academy.hubspot.com, where we continue to walk through how a.Twooma was able to create a piece of content that was that high of impact that it was creating 4 times as many qualified leads. Again, we have very many bite-sized lessons if you're a little strapped for time, but I would definitely recommend kind of following their journey there. And that's all I've got for you. And then I'm not quite sure if we're doing a Q&A. I wasn't told. Yeah?
Just a little bit more about HubSpot Academy.
Yeah, so HubSpot Academy, again, is like a subset of HubSpot that's really just keyed in on focusing on educating about the marketing space, about educating about the sales and services space. So we create content, usually in the form of video content, but also in form of articles, depending on what type of learner you are, so that we can help users understand all levels of the different strategies that might help them be more effective at qualifying leads, at closing deals, at retaining customers. So we're kind of a full-scale educational service, but we understand that not everyone has the time to do a several-hour certification, right? So we also key into making, lessons that are a set of videos anywhere between 10 minutes to about 30 minutes, covering everything from SEO, conversion rate optimization, to just general email marketing. So definitely, totally free to use. Yeah.
So I'm doing the inbound certification.
Awesome.
So I was trying to work on buyer personas.
Uh-huh.
But specifically, how do you figure it out? I went to Facebook Audience Insights to try and plug in some keywords and try and develop, because I was doing the buyer persona, and I'm essentially what I'm doing right now is assuming who this person might be.
Right. And
which is kind of I don't want to assume that. I want to actually know who this person is. So what do you recommend?
definitely. So I think that's a really awesome question, and I'm glad you asked that, because you'll find that at first when you're making your buyer personas, there's going to be a lot of assumptions that you are making because there's only so much data available to you. But as you grow your customer base, you can start to, if you're using like a CRM, for example, you can start to really fill in the blanks. So there's a handoff between the assumptions that you make with your buyer personas in the beginning to where you will develop them. I don't see them as stagnant resources. You should always continue to revisit them to make sure that it is the most accurate representation of your ideal customer. So as you gather more data and collect it in whatever CRM you choose to use, using that insight to really develop out like who this is. Again, talking with your customers, talking with your sales team. There are different ways that you can get on the pulse of who you're actually talking to, but your company and the people that are dealing with your customers are also going to be the best resources for that, not just kind of what you'll see in your CRM. So I would recommend talking to the people that are selling to your customers and getting their insight as well. But I think it's important to move from generalizations to data-driven specifics over time. Yeah, go for it.
As far as the content, so you determine content that will be of interest to your buyer persona.
Yeah.
How do you actually implement that content? You write an article, for instance, and you put it on your website.
Yeah.
What is the next step that you're doing? Are you using Google AdWords to attempt to drive people to that spot? Or how do you implement the content?
Right, definitely. So Google AdWords is a good way to start. It could be difficult in the advertising space because budget becomes a big indicator there. In that case, I would really suggest thinking about the different channels that your buyer personas and then your current customers are on. So, for example, you can think about the social media space. Are they on Facebook? Could you advertise or promote that post on Facebook? Would it be worth it to start to invest in thought leadership pieces, like in Medium, to get that kind of awareness out there? But I would think about what channels are best to reach. And again, Kanter's going to be talking about the messaging space, which is this new era of communicating with customers. You could definitely start with advertising, but I would think about the ways that you could promote it for free on socials or social media that might be most meaningful. If you're more into kind of B2B business, LinkedIn might be the best way to go. Potentially not. But really thinking about the other platforms besides your website, because the internet is such an organic space right now and there are a lot of kind of strategies emerging, conversational strategies that speak to it's not just enough to be on your website anymore. You have to meet your customer where they want to talk, and sometimes that takes taking it to a platform that's about messaging, to take it to a platform that's on social, where they'll already organically be, as well as mixing that with your paid advertising strategies. I think we have time for one more. Okay. Well, I think we're going to turn it over to Connor then.
I don't need that, I'm good. Hey, can you guys hear me? Awesome. I need this one. Let's see, Mike. Look at that. Hey guys, thanks all for coming out. City of Cambridge and Google, thank you very much for hosting. My name is Connor Cirillo, and today we're going to talk about chatbots. We're going to talk about messaging. Quick show of hands, how many of you texted a friend today or texted a family member? Yeah, about all of you. Now, at the end of this talk, you'll understand why that's actually the way that you're going to talk to businesses. In a few short years, and you may have seen it already, the way that we communicate with businesses is going to change. And it's going to move from calling and email, which are kind of the channels of yesterday, to this more instantaneous back and forth messaging, one-to-one relationships. At HubSpot, I help lead our conversational marketing efforts, so figuring out what are the best ways to build relationships by using one-to-one platforms. Things like SMS, iMessage, Facebook Messenger, these places that we as consumers spend a ton of time, and our customers as people spend a ton of time. How do we figure out how to meet people where they are? If you want to follow me on Twitter, I do post a lot about this space, so if you want to learn more about it for that. You're also welcome to use the hashtag #chatbots today if you have any questions that we don't get to. At the end of this, I'm happy to follow up with you privately. There's a lot we're going to cover in a very short amount of time. The first thing is you'll understand the rise of messaging. What is going on with the way we talk to friends and family, and how does that impact what we expect from businesses down the line? I'll help you with a framework to identify your biggest opportunities. It's probably the first time you might be thinking about this space, and that's totally cool. You are very much ahead of where everyone else is right now just by being here, and I'll leave you with a framework that makes it really easy to understand regardless of what you're selling, your buyer persona, where they like to spend time, things that you can start to find the biggest opportunities that can make an impact. I'll show you a case study from start to finish, so we're not just going to talk theoretical. I'll show you in a very grounded example how we at HubSpot generated leads, communicated with customers in a better way, and just overall built better relationships that led to more dollars, which at the end of the day is why we're here. And the fourth, I'll give you some actionable things that you can take back to your business today, whether you're a team of 1 or a team of 100. Very grounded, easy to do, free things that make it easy to start chatting with your visitors, chatting with users, and building better relationships. But in order to go forward and figure out where we're headed, we actually need to go back and understand the rise of messaging. Marketing and sales throughout time has always been about building real relationships, this focus of one-to-one. In the good olden days, we knew everyone we did business with. We had very personal relationships. We knew their birthdays. Our sales reps were like our friends. And over time, as we wanted to reach more people and more people came on the internet, we started having this concept of one-to-many. And it wasn't just about building a relationship with you. It was about, I need to reach everybody in this room, and there's only one of me. So I have to use things like email and kind of talk at you. But as users, that's not really what we love. We love that one-to-one communication. As a quick example, I know the graphic didn't load right, but whose inbox looks like this? You have an abyss of emails. I saw a hand, thousands of emails. I really hope I didn't miss a bill because I'm never going to see it. But we've read every text message we get. And that's because we love talking to our friends. We love talking to our family. And the place we expect to hear from them are these messaging platforms. And increasingly, that's what we're going to want from businesses. We don't want them to talk at us. We want to talk with them. And we get back to this one-to-one marketing, one-to-one relationships, really getting a deep connection with the business that you might be buying from or the customers you're selling to with a thing called chatbots and a thing called messaging. Let's set the table. There's a lot of buzzwords that have been thrown around in this space, and I really want to make sure we're all on the same page. When you do go back to your teams or your business, you kind of have a good understanding of what this stuff is and what it's not. Let's start with things we all know, and that's conversations. And that's interactive communication between two or more parties. Now, we have conversations all the time. Whether you're ordering coffee, talking to a family member, we like talking to each other, and that's a thing we know how to do. Where that gets interesting, though, is this concept of chatbots. And these are computer programs that can simulate one side of a conversation. Throughout all of history, we knew conversations as one-to-one, human-to-human. That's what there was. But now we can talk and still have these one-to-one conversations with actually a robot on the other side, a chatbot on the other side. And when done right, that lets you and your business reach more people than you ever could if you only had humans helping. It comes together in this new space called conversational marketing. And I know it sounds like such a fluffy thing, but it really is the next evolution of marketing. We're getting away from that talking at people and just hoping enough of them buy over time to keep the lights on. It's about building real relationships. And you can actually do that a lot easier than you think. In order to give some perspective on the fact that this messaging stuff is really here and now is the time, I want to play a game with you guys called Which Number is Higher. The rules are super simple. I'm going to say two numbers, and you tell me which is higher. The first one, who thinks the amount of people on the top 4 messaging platforms of Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp, WeChat, and Viber is higher than the people on the top 4 social networks, Facebook, Instagram, the Twitter and LinkedIn? Who thinks more people are messaging every month? A couple. All right. Who thinks there's more people on the social networks? I mean, these are the big ones, right? You'd be surprised. It's actually the messaging platforms. There's 4 billion monthly active users in the top 4 messaging platforms alone. Now, 3.5 on the social networks, nothing to scoff at. But this chart really paints a great picture of what's kind of going on behind the scenes. That gray line shows the social networks and how they've grown over time. No surprise there. They've been big, they got bigger. But if that orange line, in just a few years, went from these messaging platforms not really being a thing to actually passing the social networks in 2015 as the biggest way that people like to spend their time. Number's not slowing down. At this point, over 4 billion people and still counting. Messaging has taken over the way that we like to spend our time as consumers, and it's bleeding into what we like as buyers. To a second one. Which number's higher? The amount of people in Facebook Messenger every month, or the amount of people on Earth in the year 1800, like the whole big spinning rock thing? Who thinks more people in Messenger? There you go, you guys get it. Who thinks there's more people on Earth, like the whole thing? Okay, there we go, 1. It's Messenger. Platforms like Facebook Messenger have an astronomical amount of people that love spending time in the platform. Over 1.3 billion people every month use Facebook Messenger. And if we zoom in, right, that chart that showed messaging platforms have gone crazy in a few years, I mean, this chart's a great example. Facebook Messenger only launched in 2014, and Facebook has invested so much in the product, the people, that it has become a juggernaut of a platform in just a few short years. People like Mark Zuckerberg know it, right? Messaging is one of the few things that people do more than social networking. Now, you don't have to agree with everything he says or does, but at this point, he knows how to see around the corner of the ways that people like to spend their time. If you look at where companies like Facebook have focused over the past few years, it's building out these messaging platforms. They know that we like being on social, but we get much better connections being on messaging. This third one for my football fans in the room. Which number's higher? The amount of GIFs shared on Facebook Messenger every second, or the amount of yards Brett Favre threw for in his entire career? I would use the Tom Brady one for this, but I couldn't find a good GIF. Who thinks higher? GIFs or Brett Favre? GIFs. No, it's Favre. Yeah, so 72,000 yards, nothing to scoff at for Favre. But the way that people are using the messaging platforms is not just about the things we say to each other. It's not just about talking. It's about expressing ourselves. Things like GIFs and emojis and stickers have become ways that we can express ourselves with more than just words, which lets us build deeper relationships. It's not just what I say to you, it's how I say it, it's how I communicate it, and it's how I really express myself deeper. But why does it matter? Like, we are businesses. You guys are all here to help your business grow. You're not here to text your friends. Well, it matters because messaging is changing what consumers expect from companies. The way that we are spending time on our mobile devices and our desktop devices, where we like spending time in messaging, is now kind of altering what we are expecting from businesses. And moving forward, you talk about the next generation of consumers. I mean, they are only messaging. That is like their dominant way of spending time. 9 out of 10 people today want to reach a business through messaging. And 51% of people want to reach a business 24/7. So you have lots of people who want to engage with you in this way. Now, I've come from some small teams, and there's not enough people to go around, right, to make that happen. So what do? Well, you have to find a way to scale it and to automate it. And that's where things like chatbots come in. The ability to automate parts of a conversation and let people build these one-to-one relationships with your business is such a powerful force for what the future of marketing and business looks like. And there's ways that you can get started with this stuff, a framework that you can take home. It's only 3 parts, pretty straightforward, of all the ways that you interact with your customers and your visitors now, whether that's in a retail store, visitors to your website, right? There's lots of ways that you talk to people and communicate with them today. And this framework will help you understand what things might make sense to try to introduce messaging or the idea of a chatbot to. The first is you want to look for things in your business that are repeatable, that are frequent and common, that impact lots of people in your business. This could be you have a lot of people asking common questions on your website or calling in with the same few questions, right? The concept of an FAQ, it's frequent for a reason. With a chatbot, this could be great here because people could help themselves. Instead of having to call in or email the same few questions, if you can let them just ask in a way that feels totally natural to them, you might be able to help them help themselves and not have to bog your support people or bog your people in the store down. You want to look for things that are predictable, that have a defined start, middle, and end. The best kind of chatbot experiences right now are ones that focus on solving a real problem and doing it well. Things where you know kind of how people are going to get into it, what should happen in the middle, and then that goal, that business goal you want on the other side. Like customer onboarding or nurturing could be a great example here, where you know if someone signs up for a product or is interested in something you're offering, you probably are sending them some kind of messaging over time to show why your product is great. Well, instead of just talking at them with an email, making it more bite-sized and making it more one-to-one and focusing on why you and your business are so great for the pain that they're facing, introducing messaging here is a great way to build better relationships in a shorter amount of time. And the third, and this is the important one, it should help you make money. It should add real value to your business. Everything you do with any marketing channel, but particularly this messaging space, should help your business automate a process that helps you get to more dollars. Perfect example, contact forms. Who here has like a contact form on their website to let people get in touch? Right, so this one's easy. This is a layup. You already know the things that you need to get from people, their name, maybe their email, and a message. Instead of giving them a wall of stuff to fill out, making it feel more consultative and be like, hey, Connor, what can I help you with today? Awesome, what's a great place I could follow up? Little things like that make such a better experience that when we go to think about where we're gonna buy a product from, we remember how people make us feel, and we remember how companies treat us. Little things like this could be a great opportunity to just make people think of you a little bit more when they start to think about buying. So to bring it back, when you're thinking about introducing chatbots or messaging or really this next wave of marketing, focus on things that happen a lot in your business. That could be a marketing, a support, a sales, anything. But any way that you interact with your customers a lot. Things that are predictable. Focus on solving one real problem. We don't need to go from 0 to Terminator in a day, right? Focus on a real use case that makes your user's life better. And it also should be something that makes you money or gets you better value. Now, I do this exercise a lot with my team where I'll take a whiteboard and a bunch of sticky notes, and we'll just start to think about things that we do and the way we interact with website visitors and leads and customers, and try to figure out if any of those fall into the buckets we just talked about. And the last time we did this, pretty recently actually, was we found lead generation was a great example. I know that we are a very leads-driven business. We like having people talk to us or want to talk to us. We know how that goes. I know the pieces of information I need from somebody in order to kind of convert them. And then every lead we get gets us closer to dollars. So for us, this was a perfect example of a place you could start. Now, if you look on the left, this is our typical landing page form. If you've ever been to HubSpot, the website, or you have forms on your own website, that should look pretty familiar, right? Go fill out some stuff, and there's value on the other side. But on the right, I'll show you how we actually turn that into a more one-to-one, a better experience, a more real human-like experience, and it had a business impact you might not expect. But first, typical landing page. When you're pushing people here, right, there should be some way for them to convert. And for us, it's a web form like this. Nothing crazy. But what I found is that web forms actually feel a lot like this. You just are asking people to fill out 8 things. And in a normal conversation I would have with any one of you, there's no way I would expect you to say 8 things to me before I acknowledge you. That's just weird. That's not how we as people like to talk. We love one-to-one, acknowledging each other, taking turns, going back and forth. The things that we passively do all the time, businesses haven't been able to meet us there yet until now. So what we did was, instead of pushing people on Facebook to a landing page, we actually tried a new ad objective that when they clicked a button, it actually popped up a conversation inside Facebook Messenger, and they could chat with us right then and there. And it looked like this. Now, if you squint or you take your glasses off, in my case, you kind of go, wait, doesn't that look like a normal conversation? Doesn't it look like I'm talking to somebody? And even though these people are talking to a business, we're able to turn that form and those things, those same things we need to get out of visitors, and make it much more back and forth. Hey, Connor, tell me about your company. How many people work there? Little things like that really add up, and people grow affinity to what you're doing. And if you kind of put them side by side now, me as a consumer and a human, I will always go for that one on the right. I will always want that one-to-one consultative approach that just feels more real. The forms, that's kind of been the way of the past, and I know we've spent a lot of time trying to make those better, but the way of the future is one-to-one. The way people want to communicate, they want to feel special. In today's kind of business, as Jory mentioned, the world is changing and people want convenience. They want to feel loved and respected by your business. Meeting them in a way that's one-to-one, that they already like to spend their time, is a great way to do that. And conversations are a totally natural way to collect information. We give information through messaging to our friends and family all the time. What time will you be home from work? What kind of pizza do you want? Like those little things, we are totally desensitized to giving information and asking for information through messaging. One of the biggest things that people ask me is they go, well, why would anyone ever talk to a business? That's so weird. But it's still messaging, so what's so weird about it? As humans, this is the way we like to be, and introducing being able to talk to a business is actually a great way to add value. People aren't going to be scared. It really doesn't matter what you're selling. This is a very natural behavior. But how did it go? It's not just that it looked cool or it was fun and I got to text at work, right? It's like, did we make money? And we did. We brought the cost per lead down on Facebook Messenger over 30% versus a landing page. We were able to make it easier for people to convert. It wasn't about dragging them to a form and making them fill out stuff. It was we met them where they were spending time, and the results showed that. On the flip side, though, or further down the funnel, we built better relationships, and those people who came through Messenger were 40% more likely to talk to our sales team than if they had come through that same landing page. When you meet people where they spend their time and talk to them the way they like to talk to their friends and family, you will see better results. That's just kind of a fact. Inside the bot, this is really cool. On the comments. These are real comments from people signing up for, it was a webinar that we had run for this particular case study. And if you notice, people are saying, that's a cool ad. Oh, you should totally sign up for this. I had so much fun registering. I have run a lot of marketing campaigns in my day, and that's the first time people have been excited about signing up for something. In the past, it's been like the dentist, right? You know you have to do it. Let's just get it over with. But now, when I saw this, I said, wait a minute. We can actually make this delightful and enjoyable for people to do. Inside the bot, it gets cooler. We told people it was a bot. It was really straight up that this is not a human. We've automated this conversation, but check out this software, check out this webinar we're doing. And people were still saying, wow, that's amazing, and I love you. What we also noticed was that people were saying thanks a lot. And if someone thanked me as a human, I would say you're welcome, but because I'm a millennial and I ruin everything, I'd probably use a GIF. And on messaging platforms, using GIFs are totally natural. That's how I primarily talk to everyone I know. And using a GIF in this case for a business was awesome. People loved it. It met people in the way they spent their time in a way that's already normal to them. We don't have to teach them how to look at a GIF and understand it. It made sense. So how can you do this? How can you go back to your team of 1, 100, whatever you're selling, and start getting messages that build better relationships? The first thing, and this is the easiest one you can do right now, is add a button to your Facebook page. If your business has a Facebook page, you can actually add a button to it so people can message you. Now, you can have a human behind that, you can automate parts of it, but leverage the traffic you already have. If there's already people going to your Facebook page, why not make it really easy for them to get in touch with you? I kind of think of this as like when you started a business 20 years ago, everyone had a phone number. And a lot of businesses still do. But now, the ability to message a business is kind of going to replace that phone number as the way that a lot of people will want to reach out to start. You can install things like customer chat. This is a free plugin from Facebook, free tool, where you're actually able to talk with people on Facebook Messenger without them ever leaving your website. You, again, can automate it, not automate it, have a real person in there. But being able to engage with them in real time, and then what is really cool is once someone chats with you on that customer chat or through Messenger, they can keep the conversation going. Maybe they talk to you on your website, but then they have to go run and pick up the kids. But they can keep that conversation going on Messenger. The ability to carry that conversation with them is super powerful. There have been plenty of times where I've been sitting on hold with a company, willing to give them my money or willing to do something with them, and it just took too long and I had to go. But the ability to take that wherever I go and pick the conversation up later is really powerful as users are on the go more and on their phones more. You can use CTAs and buttons on your website. It's not just about Facebook Messenger, but Messenger, I think, is one of the better platforms that does this. You can add buttons so people can click it on a website or whatever, or an email, and then engage with you on Facebook Messenger. This could be great if maybe you have a blog that already gets a lot of traffic, or an email list that you're using to reach people. If there's something specific you want to use messaging for, adding a button like this that says, hey, chat with us on Messenger, or sign up for this on Messenger, it's a really easy way to start driving traffic to that experience. And then you can run a send a messenger campaign. This is what we did for that webinar. But the ability to capture people while they're still on Facebook and they don't have to leave Facebook, that's really powerful. Platforms like Facebook are rewarding advertisers who keep people on the platform. If you don't make people leave kind of Facebook products, you will see cheaper reach, you will see better results. And Messenger, I think, is like the most powerful tool we've had in years to do that. Letting people sign up for things or interact with your business, again, without them ever leaving those blue walls, is super powerful, and you will see cheaper results. There are free tools to get started with this stuff. One I really like is called ManyChat. So manychat.com. It's a free tool. Has a really easy to use kind of layout for this stuff. Like building conversations and chatbots really isn't that hard to do. It's very linear. You would just kind of think of, well, if I could have this conversation in person with you, how would it go? And just thinking of it like that, I mean, this stuff is really easy to get started with. And the paid plan is like $10 a month. You will get your money out of it if that's what you want to do. I can promise that. Conversational marketing is like the biggest shift we've had in marketing in 10 years. Really, since mobile phones started becoming a thing and people had the internet with them everywhere, I'd say this is the biggest shift we have. People spend more time on their phones than ever before. Whether they're B2B buyers, B2C buyers, it really doesn't matter. As people, that's where we're spending our time. We're also spending it in fewer places than ever before too. Most people only use 3 or 4 apps in a given day. And messaging apps, I bet, are one of them for just about everybody. By being able to meet buyers where they spend their time and kind of build those one-to-one relationships that we as humans just crave and love is super powerful. So go chat now. Go start with this stuff. We are in the very early innings of this space. The sooner you can figure out what use cases make sense for your business and what ways you can delight customers in a better way, you will have crazy, crazy success in this space. Again, if your buyers are humans, they want to chat with you. I'm Connor, guys. Thank you so much for having me. Happy to take questions if anyone has any. Yes?
So is the Chatbots, is that an app that is, I was trying to figure out if you're describing it from a theoretical point or an actual functional application. Yeah, I was just trying to figure out.
Yeah, so chatbots basically can live inside any messaging platform. Think of chatbots as that underlying tech that you can put in any place. So if you want to do it through iMessage or text messaging or Facebook Messenger, basically anywhere that you go to talk with like texting kind of communication, you can deploy this stuff. Chatbots aren't like an app. That's an underlying technology that you can kind of use throughout everything. Yeah?
Available recommendations for like providers of the service besides that ManyChat?
Chatfuel's a good one. Yeah, Chatfuel's another good one that integrates to a lot of other tools. If you power your website through like Zapier or you connect your tools together, Chatfuel's a good one. Chatfuel. I didn't win the spelling bee, but I got that one. Yeah, that's a good one. There definitely are like other, I'm trying to think of another good one for, let's follow up later. I'll find some like, there's like texting or iMessage ones I can show you, but the messenger ones are really sophisticated. Yeah.
So the chatbots are set up within your social media messaging. They're not on your website.
You can deploy them on your website. You can have them on like the social media stuff like Messenger, but it is really powerful to be able to chat with people too on your website. Things like live chat, like you don't have to automate everything, but you want to build those one-to-one relationships. So you can put Messenger on your site, a normal live chat widget. That's cool, but just make sure you're like able to message back with people or have a bot do it. Yeah.
So I think did you say that they normally cost around like $10 a month?
That particular platform, it's a freemium thing, so the paid plan is like $10 a month, but you could do this stuff for $0. Like there's no.
Okay, well more so what I was going to ask, like why wouldn't you just have a person like do these things, but is it just more the cost effectiveness?
It depends on the use case. So there are some things like collecting information for like lead generation or a contact form where like I know how that should go. I kind of know the things I need from you. If we could have it face to face, it's kind of a pretty straightforward experience. So why would I pay a human more to do that when I could probably have a bot handle that part? Where it is great to use humans and bots together is things like the bot collects the information and then you can have a real sales rep follow up with them. Your sales rep shouldn't have to keep collecting information, right? Like that's kind of not the best use of their time. But when you use bots and humans together, it's a great way to maximize everybody's time, which is awesome. Yeah.
Maybe I don't know how to phrase it, but phrase it right. There's so many messaging platforms
Mhm.
right now, and some people like they're founded by by countries, by ages, but some people use ones and then don't use the others. For example, if I go to Latin America, everybody's using
WhatsApp. Yep.
If I'm going to Asia, everybody's using Viber.
Yep.
If USA, they don't even know that exists. So, like, what is a good platform that anyone, I can pay, but they don't need to have Facebook, or they don't need to have WhatsApp, or they don't need to have this one, so I can contact them directly. That would be like something that someone, obviously I want USA
Mhm.
local, business local, but I want something that multi-generations can use.
Sure.
I found that not everybody, like above generations X, likes Facebook.
Yep.
And the generation below me, millennials, loves Instagram.
Mhm.
So what platform can handle all without they have to subscribe?
Yeah, so the question for anyone in here is basically like, what's the best kind of platform overall? Different generations and different regions like using different platforms. What's kind of like the best one overall to use? I use Messenger a lot because I think the platform itself is really, really sophisticated. You also don't have to have a Facebook account to use Messenger, which I think is super important. So business, like even if your audience maybe doesn't use Facebook all the time, the ability to still chat with them on Messenger is pretty powerful. To Jory's point of understanding who your buyers are, where they like to spend their time, this is part of, as you develop that persona, something that should be more clear of, oh, my users fall into this age bracket, this is the social network they like to be on, maybe Messenger makes more sense. Or it could be maybe like SMS or texting makes more sense. There's not one right or wrong platform. I really love Messenger just because it's easy to build great experiences. What Messenger does that some of the other platforms don't is they give you a lot of like visual tools. So things like buttons to help steer the experience. So people can kind of click of where to go next. So it's about using kind of texting and also the buttons, and Facebook does a good job of building a full platform for it. What the problem is with things like SMS sometimes, if you're just texting words, it's not always super clear what you should do next. And I think Messenger makes a much more kind of like steered experience, which is great. Focusing on solving that one real problem, Messenger I think is a better way to do it. And the platform itself, 1.4 billion people every month. If your audience is in North America, you could put all your time on Facebook Messenger and that would be great. That's really where people like to be. If you have more of a global audience, places like South America, Latin America, parts of Europe, that WhatsApp platform, which is also owned by Facebook, is huge. Asia's a little bit fragmented, so it kind of depends on the country. But yeah, Messenger I would say is like, if you can pick one to start with today, it'd be Messenger. And then if you have a more nuanced use case, build into that over time. But Messenger is the one you should start with.
I guess that one last one.
Yeah.
Do people see it as insincere? Like, will people be like, oh gosh, there's nobody really behind this, or what have you? How do you bridge the gap between that?
So set clear expectations up front of this is a bot, humans are available if you need them. The worst thing you can do is deceive people. That's when they get mad. What I found though, and after running a ton of tests here, is people don't care if it's a bot, a human, or a cat with a keyboard, right? They just want their problem solved and they want it done fast. So as long as your experience is actually good at solving that problem, this insincerity part, I wouldn't worry about that too much. To his point earlier of using them together, using humans and bots of, look, this bot's just going to collect some information, and then we have a real human to kind of step in. Using them together is a great way that you can still get that real kind of emotional connection. But and if you saw it from earlier, we got people to say they loved this bot, and they knew it wasn't a human. So the concept of messaging, I don't think people are worried about it being insincere per se. Yeah. It depends on what you want to do. You could start collecting information and like replace your contact form in half an hour. It really, like, there's no code to set this stuff up. It's really straightforward. I like the ManyChat platform because like I'm not a developer by any background, and so the ability to kind of drag and drop and just move things back and forth in a very visual way is good for me. Also, not having to code is super helpful. So, yeah, you could do a contact form in half an hour. This stuff is really, really easy to set up. The hard part, though, is actually how do you like write for a good conversation? The thing, like we have them all the time with each other, but like thinking about, oh, how would I actually start this conversation with the user? Kind of that copy is the harder part to refine. The building the skeleton of it, super easy. But over time, you'll have to iterate to find like, what's the right way to start this experience? Or, oh, I asked for an email, my user said something totally different. How do I steer them back on track? So it's those little things after it's launched that take more time. Yeah.
Once you set this up, is there a way that you can use Messenger as a platform to jump in, and have a person-to-person dialogue, or is it always bot-to-person?
No, so that's a great distinction. It's really easy to get humans in there to take it over. Facebook has like the business account kind of inbox, so you can respond to people on your business's page through Messenger, and there's a really easy place to do that on Facebook. With the tools like ManyChat and plenty of others have it, they actually have like a dedicated inbox. What's really cool is you can set rules of when you should escalate things to a human, when you want people to talk to a human. For instance, if someone gets something wrong 3 times, okay, maybe then the bot can't help them. You should probably get them in touch with a human if you can. you can make it really easy to alert the humans too of, hey, somebody needs help. It's time to kind of step in. But it's really easy to hand that back and forth. Again, finding what the balance is. On one end, right, we have conversations that should be totally automated, and then ones that are totally human. Finding what that balance is for your business and your use case will kind of be the important thing that you figure out through testing over time. But it is easy to move it around. Yeah.
So the example where you guys were having that chat,
Hmm?
just to be clear, how did people end up in that chat? Did they click a button, chat with HubSpot, or did they? You're saying it was sort of in lieu of the contact form.
Yep.
But
Here, I'll go back to
how
it.
did they end up in the chat? I guess.
Yeah, so in this, there's a lot of places. The way we did it was through, if you see that sign up button at the bottom, they would click that, and then actually a conversation messenger would pop right up, which is great. So then it would be like really targeted from there. We'd say, you know, hey Connor, sign up for this webinar. What's your email, kind of thing.
They hit that button, they received that first message from you. That's
Yep.
the first question.
Right, and in our case, like we said, we basically like let them, we kind of told them this is what you're about to get into, like you're gonna sign up for this webinar, we need to collect some information from you, click here to start kind of thing. So, but you can get people into these experiences in a lot of other ways. So again, using these buttons on your website, using paid ads, there's a lot of different ways that you can kind of get people into them.
I'm assuming you can somebody can click on your website and end up in a chat on Facebook.
Mhm.
Probably.
Yeah, that's pretty easy. Yeah, that's where this like customer chat thing is super cool because they can chat with you on Messenger without leaving your website, which is super powerful to have those best of both worlds. But plenty of experiences where maybe on mobile, if you have a form normally on your website, but you don't really want them filling it out, you could just say click here to sign up, right? And they could kind of go right into Messenger for that experience. So moving between the two is super easy. Also getting from Messenger back to your website, if that's what you want to do, that's really, really easy. Facebook has cool, basically like cards that you can put images and text and links and really format it in a really nice way to move people back to a website if that's what you want to do. So moving around is really easy to do.
We have time for one last question.
Yeah.
A quick back office question. So I typically have my contact form on my website sent to my inbox. Can you set that up so that the email and everything that they're gathering
Yep.
can go right to your inbox, or does it have to go somewhere else?
No, these platforms, I really like that you can like glue together all the tools you're using today. So if you just want like an email in your inbox that says, hey, there's someone on Messenger to chat with, you could have that. You could also use a tool like Zapier is a really good one if you want an email and you want the Messenger conversation, being able to do both. What I do, again, love about these platforms is you shouldn't have to rip out anything you're doing today. It should augment everything you're doing and kind of add another layer of personalization on top of kind of everything else you're doing to reach people. Cool. I'm going to be hanging around too. If anyone has any other questions, I'll be right outside. But thank you guys very much.
So thank you, Connor. We're going to do a quick stage reset. Just give us 60 seconds here, and then we'll bring up our next speaker, and we'll be right back with you.
Yeah, right. Try and get it a little closer.
Hi, everyone. I think we're going to get started. So thank you so much to the City of Cambridge and Google for having us here today. Thank you for having me. My name is Emily Kanter, and I'm the second-generation co-owner of Cambridge Naturals. We're a 44-year-old natural products retail business in Porter Square. And I'm here today. My father, Michael, is also in the audience. Hello to him. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about how to stand out or watch out, how to be extraordinary in a competitive retail environment. And I think we all understand that online is becoming an increasingly prevalent part of the retail world. But there's a lot of hype that brick and mortar retail is dead, and I think that hype is very untrue and also going to become increasingly untrue. But I want to talk about how to continue to grow and thrive in this competitive marketplace. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with the online clothing retailer Everlane. Everlane came out about 5 years ago, and they're most well known for providing very attractive sort of utilitarian pieces at competitive prices that compete with your traditional retail clothing prices. And they're known for their sustainability and their transparency initiatives. And they're also pretty well known for making fairly arrogant statements. Like, for example, we are going to shut the company down before we go to physical retail, which is a quote given by the founder and CEO, Michael Praisman, 5 years ago, or a little over 5 years ago. So fast forward to at the end of last year, Everlane is opening their first 2 brick-and-mortar stores, one in New York and one in San Francisco. They've actually since opened, and they have plans to open more stores after that. And this was not at all a surprise to me. I actually kind of assumed this was going to happen at some point if they were going to, again, survive and thrive. And this has been happening across the board with online retailers. Amazon is opening up physical locations. Warby Parker, which is an eyeglasses company, they've opened up many physical locations around the country. And I think a lot of companies are starting to realize the critical importance of connecting with your customers, as the previous speaker said, one-on-one, but more importantly, in person. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, again, how to survive and thrive and how we do it at Cambridge Naturals and how we are going to hopefully continue to do so. A few years ago, I read about a talk given by this designer, Alfredo Muccino, who works for a company called Solid Branding Agency. I think he's the founder of that company. He's a very talented designer and design thinker, and he was speaking to a group of very large retailers like Target. But I actually think a lot of his messaging applies to small brick-and-mortar retail and small business in general. So I'm going to steal his concepts. Actually, there's quite a lot stolen in this presentation. So to survive and thrive, he said that brick-and-mortar retail must be authentically 3 things. It must be theater, it must be a laboratory, and it must be a town square. And I'm going to talk a little bit about each of these and why I think those are important. So the first one is theater. So when you walk into our store, Alfredo Muccino talks about theater as the opportunity to surprise and delight your customers at every twist and turn. So when you walk into our store, and again, we don't do things perfectly every day, but this is what we strive to do. We greet you when you walk in. We smile. We say hello. It's genuine. We ask you if we can help you find anything. If you say, oh, I'm looking for this product, we don't say, oh, okay, it's over in aisle 5. We say, let me get someone to help you find where that is. And we walk you over to the product. And then we show you all the different options. And we say, is there anything else I can help you with? Or we tell you a story about why we love a particular brand. And we're constantly doing that theater and engaging with our customers in person, one-on-one. And it takes a lot of work, and it's very expensive. But it creates relationships with our customers. And again, it surprises and delights. My father said many times that, traditional retail or typical retail experiences are like, when you walk into a room and you turn on the lights come on, You expect that to happen. Nothing special. You don't jump up and down and say, oh my God, the lights came on. And most retail experiences are kind of like that. You walk in, you get your product, you leave, it's pretty transactional. We don't want the experience at Cambridge Naturals to ever feel simply transactional. It should feel like you're in an experience. We think a lot about the user experience and doing that theater every day. So the second piece of this is creating a laboratory. And so online, it's a very visual experience. It's very attractive. It's compelling to see something beautiful and click. However, we're not just visual as humans. If we're lucky to have all of our senses, then we're very tactile beings. So we like to touch and taste and smell and feel. And when we walk into a store like ours, you're instantly greeted by the wall of candles that are up front, and they smell amazing. One of the most frequent comments that we get is, "Oh my gosh, it smells amazing in here." And there's good music playing, and we often have people kind of like dancing in the aisles, customers dancing in the aisles or singing along or asking us what tune is playing, and it makes them feel good. So we're trying to create this sensory experience for you. And then you can walk up to a shelf and you can try a tester of hand lotion, and you can feel it on your hands, and you can smell it, and you can really see if it's the right product for you. And when you're online, you don't get that sensory experience. You don't know if that lotion is going to smell good or you're going to hate the way it smells. You don't know if it's going to feel good on your hand or feel sticky. You can't see the bottle of supplements. You can't see how big a product is compared to something else. It's very hard to get that real tactile experience online. And so we go out of our way to create that as you're walking through our aisles. So it's, again, a laboratory, an opportunity to touch and taste and smell and feel. So the third thing that he talks about is the concept of the town square. And this might be the most important element of the three. And so at Cambridge Naturals, we really try to create opportunities for building community within our store. And again, this is hard to do, and it's cumbersome, and it sometimes doesn't go so well, and it's sometimes expensive. But we try to create opportunities to engage with our customers in a really patient and generative way. And again, we're doing that theater with them, but we're genuinely listening to them, talking to them, making them feel seen and heard, and providing that sense of community. And we're also creating spaces in our store for customers to connect with each other almost serendipitously. So, we don't have town squares anymore like we traditionally did. And when our customers walk into our store and they, one person sees another and they haven't seen each other in 5 months and they start talking and, engaging with each other, it's a really magical experience to watch. Often we have a bulk herbs section and a table in that section, and often someone will be filling up a bag of herbs, like a bag of dried lavender, and someone else will come over and say, "Oh, what are you doing with that lavender?" And they'll talk about the recipe, and all of a sudden, 2 people who didn't know each other, 45 minutes later, they're best friends, they're sharing phone numbers, they're sharing recipes, they're selling each other our products. "Oh, you should try this, oh, you should try that." So it benefits us as well in the long run to create that sense of community. People from all different walks of life, people who never would have interacted with each other on a day-to-day basis, people who never would interact with each other online. So this is somewhat of a bold, arrogant statement, but I think that rebuilding these meaningful human connections will be one of the most critical social movements of the 21st century. And that small businesses, and especially retail, but many small businesses can be at the forefront of that movement and a powerful antidote to our increasingly disconnected society. And I've been reading a lot recently about loneliness and disconnection and how it's causing a lot of pain in our society, both in the sense of acute, mental unwellness and also in terms of our longevity. And I think building those connections within our store or within any business, if you walk into a great coffee shop, if you walk into a bookstore, are so, again, critical to the health and wellness of our communities, and they will also help our businesses in the long run thrive. So how do we build better businesses, as small brick and mortar retail businesses? So In a little bit, I'm going to talk about this first one, focusing on whole brand authenticity. Also designing an amazing customer experience. So that's a little bit what I talked about before with the theater and the town square and the laboratory element. So we really do think about that user experience. You know, they talk a lot about user experience in the high-tech world. Well, we're talking about it in the high-touch, small business, brick-and-mortar retail world. Another way that we do this is by creating meaningful living wage jobs. So we have gone out of our way to try to create, again, meaningful living wage jobs at Cambridge Naturals, and this has not been easy, and it has not been inexpensive. But about a year and a half ago, we raised our starting wage to $15 an hour, which is considered the living wage in our area. In addition to that, we offer, thank you. In addition to that, we offer 100% medical and dental coverage. And we don't do this just out of the goodness of our hearts, though we like to think, you know, we're decent people. But we do this because it actually makes for healthy and well employees. And we're a business that values health and wellness. And we're a business that caters to customers who come in seeking solutions for their health and wellness. And it wouldn't serve us to have employees who are not able to pay their bills or who are struggling to survive. And we can't control all the factors that impact our employees' daily lives, but this is one really important way that we can do that. And it's one way, again, that we can encourage our employees to show up and be present and do an amazing job and do great customer service in a genuine way, you know, rather than feeling anxious or stressed about their incomes. We also try to provide as many thoughtful learning experiences as we can for our employees. So it's providing that education on a daily basis. We do a lot of trainings in store. We bring in outside educators for our staff and really talk about our products and help our employees understand the why about why we carry these products. And that's important because when our employees are selling our products to our customers, we want them to genuinely know and care about those products. And then, you know, the last one, and again, maybe it's the most difficult, but valuing that diversity in people and perspective. And it's, you know, being willing to bring in challenging perspectives into your own business and not always, you know, believe that your way is the right way. You know, we're really committed to our mission and vision, but it's not a static thing, and the world is changing and perspectives are changing, and so we need to be willing to have those conversations, as difficult and painful as they may be, but valuing that diversity of perspective is so critical to us being able to adapt and grow and survive and thrive over time. So we are humans even at work, and our employees are humans even at work. And so just continuing to remember that, you know, small business is a struggle and it's a daily grind, but, you know, we don't hire robots for a reason. We hire humans in all of their messy wonderfulness. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the quest for whole brand authenticity, which is a term, I believe, coined by my husband, Caleb Dean, for an article that he wrote for Rotman Magazine last year, or a year and a half ago. And whole brand authenticity is a concept of combining your external brand and your internal operations and your internal brand. So in this article, I think this is a really telling quote. He said, "In a world where industries are being disrupted left and right, having a strong brand is no longer enough to compete. These days, companies must design their internal experience to authentically embody their external image. Because with greater access to information and why companies exist and who works for it and the authenticity or the ability of any stakeholder to gauge brand authenticity or inauthenticity continues to grow." So I think we're all probably familiar with stories of, you know, where we thought one thing about a brand and then we heard a different story that was actually very telling about who that brand is and what they stand for. And again, you know, this is all messy and murky, and no company is perfect. Even a mission and a vision is a mission and a vision for a reason, but it's what you're striving for. You don't always succeed at all times, but you're setting up the building blocks you know, to move in that direction. And there are plenty of companies that put out a message of who they are, and then you find out that they're actually really not like that on the inside. And so we're constantly thinking about this whole brand authenticity. Again, if we're selling health and wellness, we want to be healthy and well. At the very least, we want to create that type of environment at work. So we ask ourselves these 3 questions. In what ways does our customer experience integrate with our employee experience? In what ways do our company's values and mission align with our actions? And what story do we want our customers and our employees and our suppliers, any of our stakeholders, to be telling about our brand? So what's the brand story that we're telling and embodying, hopefully, every day? So we're a very active member of Cambridge Local First, and we were one of the founding members of Cambridge Local First. And this is an organization that is critically important to our success because Cambridge Local First really understands the value of local business and champions it within our community. And so we've been very active participants in Cambridge Local First because we believe in local and independent businesses, and we want them to survive and thrive, and so we pay attention and we work within that. We're also a certified B Corporation, and this was a really important process for us. It's a very rigorous 200-plus question assessment that we went through in 2014, and we've since been recertified, and we're about to be recertified again. And that is, it measures your social and environmental and economic impact you have and the good that you're doing in the world beyond just earning a profit. And if you succeed in passing a certain number of criteria, you're able to be certified as a certified B Corporation, and you can tout that to your customers and employees. And we've actually had people shop with us because they said they've learned about us through B Corp. We've had employees come to apply for us, apply to work with us because they've heard we're a B Corp. So it's been, a great part of our storytelling. And then, of course, there's we support fair pay today, and so that was, raising our wage to the living wage. We've also been vocally active in raising the minimum wage in the state of Massachusetts to $15 an hour, and vocally active about not supporting a separate teen wage, but supporting everyone at a $15 minimum. And we talk a lot about this. We make it a part of who we are. And we talk to our employees about it as well. And then, last but not least, we're also a member of INFRA, the Independent Natural Foods Retailers Association, because again, we believe in independent businesses and we believe in the health of our communities. And so we partner with independent natural foods retailers across the country to help support each other and continue to survive and thrive. I also really like to think about brands that catalyze me outside of our sort of, realm, our little bubble that we exist in. So outside of Cambridge and Boston, and even outside of the natural products industry, and even outside of sort of, the quote-unquote wellness industry. And so these are 4 brands that really catalyze and inspire me on a daily basis. And one of them is a small clothing brand called Elizabeth Suzanne, and they're based out of Nashville, Tennessee. And she's doing some really incredible things in terms of transparency and pushing the envelope on how to show women and in wearing clothing and how to create great experiences for her customers, and she's very vocal about it. And so I read a lot about the things she does. And again, it's a totally different business model than us, but I've been inspired by her work and taken some of the things that they've done and applied it to our own business. Badger Balm, they're a company out of New Hampshire, and we sell their products, but they're a manufacturer, so again, a different business model than ours, but they're a family-owned business, so there's a connection there. And then they also do some things that are totally outside the box and things that we dream about doing and couldn't figure out how to do, like they have a Babies at Work program, and so mothers are able to bring, I think it's after 6 months, they get their maternity leave, and then after a certain age, they're allowed to bring the babies into work, and there are people who play with the babies and take care of the babies, and it's a communal effort. And I think that's so magical, and maybe someday we'll be able to do something like that. But again, it's inspiring to me, and a lot of the things that they do within their organization. Of course, Patagonia, many of you are familiar with that company and a lot of their transparency initiatives, and the way that they're pushing forward their messaging and creating really great customer relationships. They've done this huge campaign called Worn Wear, where you're able to return your previously worn garments, and they repair them and repair them again, and then even make them into new things. And again, that life cycle mentality, that sustainability mentality is inspiring to us. And then Zingerman's Deli, they're in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and the way that they have grown, they're actually no longer just a deli, they're Zingerman's community of businesses, and they have grown by, instead of creating facsimiles of themselves, they've created a community of businesses, ancillary businesses that talk to each other and work with one another. So there's the deli, the bakery, the coffee shop, the mail order business, the customer service training business, the restaurant, and they all connect with each other and work with each other and support each other, and it's a really interesting model of growth. And they also do phenomenal things with how they talk about customer service and the customer experience, and how they treat their employees as well. And so again, inspirational businesses outside of our realm. And I use these daily as how to sort of get out of my bubble and think about our future. So my husband and I were talking the other day, and I don't know how many of you are Harry Potter fans, but we are. And we were saying, so Diagon Alley is this street in the world of Harry Potter, for those who may not be familiar, and it's where wizards go to purchase all their goods, and it's this sort of magical, no pun intended, it's this magical place where there are no chains in Diagon Alley. There are no big box stores. It's little shops, and it's bustling, and it's community, and it's lit up and beautiful, and people are connecting. And it's built of bricks, mortar, and also this element of magic. And so, for us, the magic lies within the center of these three things, and in building that whole brand authenticity between our internal and external brand. And that's where we want to create that magic, and we believe that will allow us to survive and thrive into the future. So thank you so much for listening to me, and if you have any questions, happy to answer them. Any questions? I think we're going to do a sit-down event.
I don't have a question, I have a comment. I really believe that you make the magic happen.
Thank you. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Wonderful experience. Every time my entire family, that's all my kids ever want, is a gift certificate to Cambridge Naturals. Holidays.
Awesome. That's wonderful. Keep them coming. Anything else? Okay, great. I think we're going to do a little fireside chat with no fire.
I know, I have to think of a different name.
A little slower at the end of the day because I've been going up and down that big ramp. Oh. Hello.
Hello.
Nice to
Ezekiel.
meet you.
Nice to meet you.
I am Lisa.
Hi.
So, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for continuing to be with us today. My name is Lisa Hammerly. I'm the Director of Economic Development for the City of Cambridge, and I'm really happy to be here today as a moderator. And I'd love it if Ezekiel and Emily could. Well, you've already introduced your company, so. But Ezekiel, it would be great to hear more about you and your company.
Okay. My name is Ezekiel Wheeler, and I'm the owner of Intelligent Labor and Moving. We're a local 5-crew moving company located in Cambridge and Arlington. We've been in business for 13 years, and all of that locally. We do residential moving for local residents and employ people in the neighborhood, so to speak. And thanks for having me.
Great. So a lot of the things that we've been talking about today is the importance of the local business community. And I know that you both are, find that really important, and I'd love to hear, how do you involve yourself in the local business community and the local community in general, and then how do you kind of get that message out to your employees and your customers as well?
So we're, as I said, very active members of Cambridge Local First, and so my father was one of the founding members and has been on the board for a long time. And so, we talk about it in all of our social media messaging. We talk about being a local business, why it's important to be a local business, and we try to get out and talk be at as many events as we can to sort of promote that messaging. But to be honest, I think a huge part of it is also just being a great business citizen to some degree, and being a good local business, and people will talk about it for you in some ways if you are a really exciting business.
So a lot of word of
shop
mouth.
with. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think one of the ways in which we participate in the local community and with other local businesses is by making sure our employees are both considerate of our customers, because we go into people's houses and we go into their bedrooms and their living rooms, and we see them in a vulnerable capacity. And to do that, you have to have a certain mentality, and it's important to maintain that mentality not just when we're in our customers' houses, but when we're out in the community. So we like to think we stop at crosswalks. If we see someone that needs a hand with something, we participate. And then also as a business, we do the same thing by participating in organizations like Cambridge Local First, donating to local nonprofits, and providing discounts for local nonprofits, and finding ways of participating in whatever other way we can.
Great. Since we have such a short period of time together, I think we're just going to open it up for questions if people do have questions over the course of the rest of this session. But while we're waiting for somebody to maybe come up to the microphone, I'd love to ask. I saw that you have 60 PV panels, solar panels.
Oh, yes.
On the warehouse,
Yep.
which I'm totally obsessed with checking Solar Edge, because I just put 20 panels on my house.
Oh, cool.
So it's a little bit of an obsession, but I'd love to hear more about both of you talk a little bit about the sustainability efforts of both your companies.
Sure. We have a 17 kilowatt hour installation set up on the roof of our warehouse. It completely powers our business. We don't consume any other electricity. In fact, we generate a surplus. But you don't generate a surplus all year round. It's important to understand with solar that you're going to generate more in the summer and less in the winter. When your solar panels are covered in snow, you're not making any electricity. But it works and it functions because the state government has set up a program called SRECs, which allows you to, in essence, bank your generated electricity through net metering with the utility company, and then they have to sell it back to you at the same rate at which they paid you for it. So they set the rate. They buy the electricity from you at that rate, and then they sell it back to you at the same rate. So you can, in essence, generate in the summer and then use it in the winter using the grid as a massive battery. Without that, it gets a lot harder. And so it's important to express to your government that this is a great program and it really can drive local businesses and local residents to set up solar. I won't get into the benefits of solar on a bigger scale, but it would be a lot harder to pull off without these sorts of programs that allow us to do that sort of thing.
Absolutely. Emily?
Yeah. Sustainability is to some degree baked into the mission of what we do every day. We think about the products that we carry, and all of our brands, we're always striving for products that are sourced from ingredients sourced sustainably. They're harvested ethically. The people who are harvesting the crops that are making the products are being paid well. So it's baked into the foundation of everything that we do. And in addition, we support a lot of environmental and social nonprofits. So we're sort of always thinking about it. We don't own the building that we're in, so unfortunately, we haven't been able to do sort of more grand scale initiatives, although we'd love to. But we think about it more on a daily basis. What are we doing in terms of our supply chain, and then what are we selling to our customers? What are we putting out in the world that is contributing to a healthier planet and society?
Emily, I'm going to stick with you for a second because I'd
Yeah.
love to hear more about the new facility that you're opening, or new store, I should say, at the New Balance facility in Boston.
Yeah,
So
so,
great.
so we're opening our second location this summer, fingers crossed. It's in this neighborhood called Boston Landing, which is adjacent to or in Brighton, and it's an area with a lot of bustling activity, and there will be more so soon. It's under development right now, but there's New Balance headquarters, and then there's WGBH and PBS, and then Harvard Business Publishing. Bose is moving their headquarters in there, and then the Celtics and the Bruins are also have their practice facilities there. So there's a lot of action going on, and we were actually approached, or we started a conversation with this amazing broker called Graffito, and Jesse was going to be here today but couldn't make it. But they are passionate about putting in local business on the ground floor in large-scale neighborhood developments. You know, instead of putting in your CVS, your Starbucks, your typical chain retailer, they want to put in interesting mom-and-pop style businesses that attract a diverse community of people to them.
That's great. So Ezekiel, I was wondering, because your business model with moving, obviously people aren't moving every day, and they're not moving every month. Well, unless they're like me, I moved 6 times in 6 years.
Oh my God.
But hopefully that isn't the norm for a lot of people. They're kind of staying put. But so how does that translate, into a kind of repeat customers, or is it kind of like a word of mouth thing for new customers? Yeah, I'm really curious.
Repeat customers require being in it for the long run. So if you want someone who moves once every 5 years to be a repeat customer, you have to be around again in 5 years to help them move again.
Yep.
So to a great degree, it's a bit of a long con being a moving company that depends upon repeat customers. But it works great because to have a repeat customer, you don't need to advertise for them. They already know who you are. They already think you're great. So I like to think that the best moving companies are the ones that are in it for the long haul, that are there to have repeat customers, and it takes a real commitment to what you're doing to fuel your business on repeat customers as a mover. But at the same time, satisfied customers spread the word, so word of mouth is super important for any moving company because advertising is expensive.
Yeah.
People don't move very often, so you really have to do a lot of advertising to whittle down to one actual conversion. Whereas just doing a good job gets you a lot more work, a lot quicker. Online reviews have changed that. Once upon a time, moving companies had to depend upon spending mountains of money on yellow pages. And these days, if you do a good job, the world will find you, which is nice.
That's great. So I know that, I'm sorry. Love to take a question.
Hi. So I don't have a small business, but I'm very interested in potentially starting one. But it seems like just at the very start, it's really hard to know where to start to make that plunge. So is there something in our community, or maybe there's a mentoring sort of program? I mean, I wouldn't even know where to begin with getting a lease, getting seed funding, contacting my vendors. Where do I find people to work at some of these jobs? I'm not sure if it's on like a monster.com where you would post these roles. So I'm just wondering, for someone who wants to get started, how you do it, and maybe also mentally how you decided to make that step to start your own business.
Well, I didn't technically start my own business, so I can't answer that question. I know that there is a group, and maybe you remember the name of them, but they're a group of senior citizens who are business consultants, and they often work, I think, for free. SCORE, yeah. SCORE, SCORE. Okay. Executives.
Okay.
And I think that they've been very helpful for many businesses in this community. For whether you're at the beginning or in the middle, you're growing, and all of a sudden you have complex HR needs that you never had before with 3 employees. So they might be great to talk to. And then I think there's an element of bootstrapping it and testing your model out before you sort of leap into the funding and all of that. Sort of is there is there a prototype of whatever your business model is that you can create and kind of test the waters and see if there's interest for it, and then build from there?
I can't speak to funding because the way I started my business was with $100 cash. I went and rented a truck and put an ad on Craigslist, and then did it again and did it again and did it again and did it again and filled up my living room full of moving equipment. That's maybe not for everybody, but what I can say is that leveraging the things that you know about yourself, that you're good at and that you know, and starting with those will take you a lot farther than you might expect. And then once you've exhausted your own sort of internal resources, by then you'll have met a fair number of people and you'll probably have accidentally learned a lot. And so just by using what you already have that you may not think you have, analyzing your own internal strengths, by the time you exhaust those, you'll have learned enough things from the people around you that you run into, and that then you can rely on just the wisdom that you've absorbed from the people you've encountered.
And I'll just say, I'll just poke in for a second to say that, and Pardees had mentioned this earlier, is that we offer a variety of workshops to help people to start their business or to maintain their competitive edge. We have a program that we partner with the Center for Women in Enterprise. It's a 10-week business training program, and I can't stress enough what a great class that is. And a variety of grant funding sources as well. So when you do get your brick and mortar, let us know, and so we can help get some grant money for you. Okay. So I think one of the other questions we wanted to ask you, and you had mentioned it, Emily, was that you pay a living wage, and I'd love to hear more about that. And because I think a lot of businesses are concerned, because margins are so tight, what is that going to do to your bottom line? But I've also heard that it helps you with employee retention, so I really just would love to hear more about that.
Yeah, so the way we did it is not the way that everyone has to do it. I've heard of other businesses who've said, okay, we're going to do this over the course of a year or a year and a half or 2 years. We decided to kind of do it in one fell swoop. But we were getting close to there anyway, so we were starting at that point at $13.50. So many of our employees who had started at that rate or had just recently started were then bumped up. And then we made some adjustments at the mid and upper levels to, kind of keep everyone happy. We ran the numbers several times. At one point I made a mistake with a zero, and we thought it was going to be way more expensive than it ended up being. We ran the numbers several times. We analyzed it, and to a certain degree, we sort of just made a big leap of faith in the end and said, we're just going to give this a try. And this is the worst case scenario, but we don't think that that's going to happen. And the result was incredibly positive. First of all, we made a point of announcing it to our customers because we thought it was important, not just for our tooting our own horn, but also for encouraging other businesses to give this a try. And we got an amazing response from our customers, and many of whom said, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I'm going to shop with you now more often than I even did. And they were telling their friends about us, and so that was great. And then we also found, kind of interestingly, that our employees, again, because we really care about our business and our employees do as well, and they love our products, our employees were actually spending more money at our store than they had been before, almost to the degree when we were like, maybe you should save some of this. But again, the result was that they had more money to spend with us because they could afford to pay more bills, and then they had more, free flowing cash. So that was exciting, and we're going to continue to push the envelope on that going forward. But so far it's worked out for us financially, and our business is growing like crazy, and I do think that is one of the reasons why.
That's so great. Thank you. Ezekiel?
When I started the business 13 years ago, one of the core ideas that I started with is that I would actually start out by paying more. At the moving company I'd worked at in the past, and where other people that I knew that worked in moving companies had worked, you'd start off at like $12.50. And then they would pay someone to babysit you and make sure it didn't go terribly, and then someone else was paid to babysit that person and make sure that they were doing their job in babysitting the kids that were making $12.50. And that seemed terribly inefficient and kind of crazy. So I started off by paying everybody $20 an hour, and then I avoided a lot of nonsense. It's pretty easy to spend a lot of money on claims and damages and on truck accidents and on people that didn't show up and all sorts of terrible things that can happen. Or you can spend it on people that are just not going to have those problems. And it also, if you spend enough on the entry-level positions, then that saves you a lot of money. You don't have to hire people to manage them because they will manage themselves instead of forcing you to have someone keep track of them. And that's worked great for me. It might not work for every business, but it saved me a lot of time. It saved me a lot of hassle. There's lots I don't have to worry about. I can trust people to do the things that I ask them to do. And it's great for retention. I couldn't imagine running a business any other way, probably because I never have. But yeah, so it was a core idea, and I can't imagine any other way to do business than to pay at least a living wage that works for the particular business you're in.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Sitting right.
Hi. So I think this is relevant. How do you find the employees? I'm a new small business owner in Cambridge and trying to recruit people, and this is a whole new world. So just curious, any suggestions, tips, thoughts?
Yeah, so we're trying to hire right now too, so far we found honestly Craigslist to be fairly useful. We've tried a few different other sites. We tried a site called Indeed.com, but we seem to get a lot of fake applications and 45 weird fake applications in the first few minutes, so we closed that down very quickly, but that might have been a fluke, I'm not sure. Then we've used Facebook and Instagram, so our customers or people who would be our customers see that we're hiring and they tell their friends, and we've had customers who shop with us currently apply for jobs. So those have been fairly successful tools. And then we've actually started doing more outreach because we're trying to attract more of a diverse crowd of applicants. And so we've reached out to local community colleges and local nonprofits as well to say, hey, we're hiring, and so let people know.
I found that much like good customers know other good customers, good employees tend to know other good potential employees. So that's where I start. If somebody knows somebody, then you at least have a little bit of a reality check on them. They didn't just kill someone yesterday. And you have you can have some sort of social control, as crazy as that sounds. Nobody wants to bring their friend in who's going to be terrible, and then when their friend comes in, they don't want to embarrass their friend who got them the job. I find that to be helpful in a number of ways. And then when I run out of those, then I go to Craigslist. Customers who know other good customers, employees that know other good employees, isn't good if you need to scale quickly. But if you can take a long view on it and you've got the time and you can predict your growth, you can get at least halfway there. But there are droughts. Problem with Craigslist, and you may have found this, is say you put an ad on Craigslist, you get 100 responses. 50 of them you can throw out immediately because they're just absolute nonsense. Of the 50 that remain, 25 of them will actually respond to an email. Of those 25 that respond, 15 of them you can immediately count out. Of the remaining 10, you try and schedule an interview. 5 of them you schedule an interview. Of those 5, 2 of them show up. Of the 2 that show up, only 1 of them are you willing to even try out. So there you've 100 emails down to 1 person that you could put in front of a customer and see what happens. So what that tells you is that once you get that 1 person that you can maybe put in front of a customer, it's very important to figure out how to turn that person into the person that you want. So it's not just about finding people, it's about finding people. You're not going to find much. It's about how do you turn the maybes into yeses. So it's just as important. Closing with sales is important. Closing with hiring is just as important. It's not just about that person. It's about you and about how you get them going and make them the person that you want. training or setting them up for success instead of setting them up for allowing them to be their best person instead of giving them an opportunity to be their worst person. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you. So one more question that I have is, the theme for today is really talking about, this really, competitive, so retail is always competitive, but, competitive environment, quickly evolving environment that we're in right now. If you had to, I'm going to do it, if we had to pick one strategy that you would employ to, maintain your competitive edge that we can kind of share with, a larger audience and they might also find helpful, what would that one strategy be?
I would say it would be to focus on providing absolutely incredible customer service, and that that will be the basis of your business's success no matter what. And without that, it's very easy to fail. So.
Yeah, the fundamentals of doing a good job. But in relation to web marketing, content, conveying that fact, making it, finding any way to convey that, whether you're good at photos or good at writing, get something together, and then you just put it into whatever the current great way of selling stuff is. Mm-hmm. You take yourself and force it in there, but have that content ready.
I've always heard this statistic that if you have a good customer experience, you might tell one person, and if you have a bad customer experience, you'll tell 20.
Right.
Now that was probably before the advent of social media, when you can tell 2,000 like right away, or your 2,000 neighbors in your mom's group or something like that.
Yeah.
But I do want to open it up for questions if we have any more.
I would also say too, with the advent of social media, that it's even easier for people to tell about an amazing experience that they had, and we constantly are blown away by these customer stories that we see on Instagram and on Facebook when they're talking about us. It's very humbling and very exciting to see how many of their friends they're sharing it with all at once. So it's a powerful tool.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it also reduces the barrier to entry for a lot of people into business. You don't have to spend $50,000 on yellow pages like you once did to have a presence in front of your customers. But I think it's even harder. It makes it harder to maintain in the long term because you can't just spend $50,000 on yellow pages. You have to continue to do a good job, or the whole world will find out you don't.
Exactly.
I'd actually like to recognize Adrienne Musgrave, who's the new Executive Director of Cambridge Local First and a sponsor of our Fireside chat today. So thank you. And
thanks, Lisa. That's very sweet of you. So on that topic, a lot of the conversation today has been about marketing and particularly digital forms of marketing, which is that rapidly expanding competitive environment in many ways. Can you guys share some of the ways that you have found it to be effective to market your business in different digital capacities and how you keep track of that? I think, Zeke, when we talked about it, you had some really interesting ways of making sure that how you look at the digital marketing world. And so just an open-ended question for maybe creating from or moving from some things that we heard today to some real-world business experience from our owners.
I think there's a lot of low-hanging fruit that doesn't take a lot of time that it would be foolish to miss out on. Just claiming your listings on everything goes a long way. Just responding to the messages that appear on those basic listings that you can claim, filling out your address, uploading 5 photos, move on to the next one. You don't have to spend a ton of time on it. It's sort of like showing up and getting a C grade at web marketing is still a passing grade, and you will stay in business. You don't have to be good at what you're good at, but I think you have to show up. Mm-hmm. You have to turn up. Turn in some homework, claim the listings, and then if you want to go beyond that, it's cool. But if you don't, you at least have to do that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do a lot with social media, with Instagram and Facebook. Less so Facebook these days, more so Instagram. Pretty much not at all with Twitter. But again, I'm going to be a little bit maybe anachronistic or controversial here, but I think marketing is incredibly important, but it's really about creating that incredible user experience. And I know a lot of I know several brick and mortar businesses who have an amazing following on social media, and then I talk to them in person, and their business is actually struggling. And they're struggling to get people in the door. And people are very active on social media, and you can do a lot of great marketing, but it's also about getting people in the door one way or another, and I think it's different for us because we're in brick and mortar retail, and it's you're in a different type of business too. But it's that word of mouth. It's getting your customers to tell your story more so than you're trying to push your story across. And it's being authentic with who you are and being approachable, and having sort of being clear with who you are on social media and your brand story, that will allow your customers to connect with you. We do things like put advertisements in certain publications, and we support a lot of local nonprofits, and that helps get our name out as well. But we're focused really on that in-person store experience, and we believe that will allow people to tell our story elsewhere, and that marketing is even more powerful than anything that we could do online.
Do we have any more questions from the audience? Rachel?
I just had a comment.
Can you stand up to the mic?
I know this was said by the person who was talking about, Nancy, I think he was talking about the Google local business, that you do need to respond to negative reviews. You had said that more people who have a bad experience will comment on it publicly. And I have had a few of those, and I have responded to them, and my challenge has always been to be, really listen to have them be heard, to know that I've heard what they've said, and then to respond in a charming, possibly self-deprecating. I think of the Italians in this sense. All my inner Italian out, and recognize problems that I might have to solve. But that interaction is part of the customer experience, because not every single person who comes into your store or to my establishment is going to come away totally wowed. And of course we want that. Of course we aim for it. But there are moments when, the coffee's too cold, or whatever wasn't right. Mm-hmm. And so we should never ignore bad reviews. I think they are actually an opportunity to have that touch with our customers that could turn them around, or at least let other people know we're listening.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Any more questions from the audience? Okay.
Just can I touch on that for?
Oh yes, please.
I mean, I completely agree. What would you pay to find out the worst thing that your company does? Like, what consultant would you hire, and what would you pay them to find out the thing that you're getting wrong that you could get right? And there it is, and you've already got the answer, and you've already paid for it, because a bunch of people aren't gonna hire it because they've seen this. So you've already spent the money, and there's the information. You have to grab it and take it and use that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So that's the way I look at it.
Well, first of all, let me thank both of you. I really appreciate being with me here today for this fireside chat. Thank you, everyone. And let me just thank Cambridge Local First again for sponsoring this fireside chat. I really appreciate it. And I just have to put out another shout out to Google. Thank you so much for hosting us today. I cannot thank Google enough. This location is amazing, and I really want to come back again soon. So thank you, and maybe just do a little round of applause for Google. Thank you so much. And then I really ask you to stick around for the Chamber of Commerce after hours networking event, and we're really looking forward to seeing everybody and continuing that conversation. And I hope to hear back from a lot of you soon. Thank you so much, and have a great evening.